everybody, and welcome to today's Neighborhood Services Virtual HOA Academy. Sorry, we're having some technical difficulties, so we're a little bit late hopping on today, so I apologize for that. We just want to give everybody a few seconds to join and enter the Zoom today and get settled. Welcome to our May class, class number 5 of our 2025 Virtual HOA Condo Academy. We teach these classes in partnership with the cities of Avondale, Chandler, Glendale, Goodyear, Mesa, Peoria, Phoenix, Scottsdale, Surprise, and Tempe. Just a quick introduction. My name is Beth Mulcahy, and I am the founder and senior partner for the Mulcahy Law Firm in Phoenix, Arizona. My firm currently represents over 1,000 planned communities and condominium associations throughout the state of Arizona. And I also currently serve on my HOA board, and I have for many years, going on 15 years now. In today's class, we are going to discuss everything you need to know about being a board member. What are your roles? What are your responsibilities? And also some tips on how you can effectively use a code of conduct to manage any challenges that you may be having on your board. Also, as always, we're going to address questions at the end of our class. I'm going to conclude the main presentation right at about noon, and we'll move right into the questions at that time. Due to the large number of attendees, we have over 120 people, I think, already, 127 when we were first logging on. Please note that there's only one question per attendee. If you're joining us on Zoom, please submit your question in the Q&A box. And if you're joining us on Facebook Live, please type your question in the comment section, and we'll be sure to try to answer every question. We have had some technical difficulties today, so please be patient with us. If for some reason things don't go exactly as planned today, I promise we will hop right back on. Okay, let's start out with a poll. Before we dive into the seminar today, I always like to know who's in my audience. So I would like for us to have a poll of who's here today. We have two questions. The first question is, which city do you reside in? And the second question is, let me know your current role for your association. Are you a board member? Are you an owner? Are you a manager? Or do you fall in an other category? Okay, while we're waiting for those results, let's do a quick discussion about what's going on in the Arizona legislature. As many of you know, our legislature has been in session for about 4.5 months now. And we are tracking a number of bills that pertain to associations. There were over 20 bills that were introduced in this legislative session in 2025. There really haven't been any status changes since May 7th, when we had our first Friday free call-in, our first Friday's virtual free call-in. As of right now, there are 3 bills that have been signed by our governor, so I'm going to only talk about those. We are monitoring the other bills, just so you are aware. And if anything changes, we'll continue to talk about it at every class that we have now until the laws become effective 90 days after the legislature closes. Okay, the first bill is Senate Bill 1039. This was signed by the governor. This bill requires that if a board records a meeting that is open to the members, so like a general meeting, an open session meeting, the board shall keep a copy of the recording for at least 6 months and make the unedited recording available to any member on request. And that was signed at the end of March 2025. So if the board's recording the meeting, you must keep a copy of that recording for at least 6 months, and it's a book and record that any member can request. And if they request it, the current law that's on the books is that we would have 10 business days to provide that record to them. Okay, the second bill that's been passed this year is House Bill 2322. This applies only to condominiums, and this bill addresses assessments on commercial versus residential structures in a condominium. Also included in this bill are definitions of a commercial structure, common expenses, and residential structure. And again, this bill only applies to condominiums, and this was signed by the governor the first week in April. And the last bill we're going to talk about is kind of a problematic bill, in my opinion. It's Senate Bill 1494. This bill only applies to planned communities, interestingly. It does not apply to condominiums. And what this bill does is it amends the Planned Communities Act section on liens and foreclosures. And basically, it says that it increases the minimum assessment delinquency time period in order to foreclose from 1 year to 18 months, and the dollar amount from $1,200 to $10,000. And so, basically what this means is after this law goes into effect, 90 days after the legislature closes the session this year, planned communities will not be able to foreclose on an assessment lien unless the assessment is 18 months past due, or unless $10,000 in assessments only is owed to the association. So those three bills are interesting bills. We've got a couple other bills that have been moved to the governor, and we are, have been watching those bills. So, we will continue to update you on any changes as we hop on and teach these classes. So, our regular classes that we're teaching are always going to be the first Friday of the month. So the next first Friday will be the first Friday in June. And then we will have our June neighborhood services HOA, virtual HOA Academy in June. And we'll probably be closing up and talking mainly about the bills that have been passed. And typically we're kind of foreseeing that the legislature will close sometime in maybe early June, early to mid-June. Could go as far as June 30th like it did last year though too. Okay, looks like I don't have the poll results, unfortunately, on my screen, so I'm sorry I can't share those with you yet. We'll add that at the end, just so that everybody knows who was here today. Okay, let's switch gears and talk a little bit about what our class topic is for today. And that class topic is going to be board member roles and responsibilities. We track all the videos that, every class that we teach since the pandemic. So it's basically been 5 years of virtual classes. And it's been amazing to teach these classes because it's a very easy way to get free information out to board members and owners and managers and others in the industry who are interested in our industry. Interestingly, the video that gets the most views that's on our website. So we have all of these videos. We have over 100 videos now that we have taught for classes. They're all on our website at mulcahylawfirm.com. But interestingly, the class that has received the most video views is our classes on board member roles and responsibilities. So this is a very hot topic. I mean, a lot of people have been elected to the board and they're like, okay, what now? Or maybe you're on your board and you have been for many years and you want a little refresher. You're not quite sure about something. Or maybe you're a manager who's new to the industry and you aren't quite sure what exactly the board's role should be and what your role is with that. So we're really going to be talking about all of these different things today to help board members be successful and understand what their roles and responsibilities are as they're serving for their communities. We have a great cheat sheet on this. Oh, one more thing I wanted to mention. We just did a summary of how many views our videos have had since 2020, and we have 107,000 views of our videos. So that makes me so happy because we have such great content on our website. I'm really pleased to hear that those in our industry are clicking on our videos to keep fresh and learning about the different topics, and also our cheat sheets. So we're going to be sharing a cheat sheet here today called Board Member Roles and Responsibilities, and also the specific responsibilities of the president and vice president. Those are two separate cheat sheets, and that will be kind of a deep dive if you have more questions after this class here today, or you want written reinforcement, you can look at that cheat sheet, and we're going to be sharing it with you on Facebook and also on our Zoom call today. Okay, so let's start out with, so you're elected to the board. What now? So remember that homeowners are looking to your board to provide leadership and service to make their community or your community a better place to live, right? They want things to be maintained. They expect that they will be treated professionally. They, want all the services that, they expected when they purchased their lot or unit in the association. And the board of directors is overseeing basically what might be one of the largest assets that community association members have, which is their home. And so some of you may notice this as you get on the board. I know I've noticed this in my 15 years now that I've served on the board, is that serving on the board one of the things that surprised me was how serious and upset owners get when they feel something isn't going right, and how they hold the unpaid volunteer board members to the highest possible standard in the decision making that they're doing. And owners really want their association to be run like a business. And they want the board members, and they expect the board members to be professional in all of their dealings and transactions with the association membership, and the association's general business affairs. So that's an expectation, even though you're a volunteer, even though you may not have spent your entire life getting ready to be a board member. Guess what? You are held to the absolute highest standard by the members in your community, which is honestly kind of a little bit of it's pressure, because I just know that each year that I practice law, I become a better lawyer. So I've been, I graduate, actually I have my 30-year law school reunion next weekend. So, I mean, each year of those 30 years that I've been practicing law, I've grown as a community association attorney. And each year you serve on your board, you get a little more experience and you handle situations maybe a little better. But even though you're a newbie, maybe a 1 or 2 year board member, or maybe you're just been elected, you still are expected to know all the things serving on a board, even though you're not getting paid to serve on the board. Okay, so let's go over what are the most important responsibilities that there are for a board. Let's spend some time talking about that. This is kind of going to be the meat of the presentation today, because I think it's really important that you understand going into your role as a board member, this is what's expected of me. Okay, so the first thing is kind of an easy one. Show up, right? Play a participatory role in your association. Attend your board meetings, arrive on time, open that board packet. A lot of associations have a management company and they get a board packet a few days or a day before the board meeting. Make sure you break that seal and take a spin through the board packet the night before. You don't have to spend a lot of time. Generally, I spend somewhere between 5 and 15 minutes, depending on how much stuff we're talking about at our board meeting, just kind of getting myself acquainted with what the board meeting is going to be about and what we're going to be voting on. And you need to be ready. You need to come into the meeting ready to discuss and vote on such issues. Like a really good example on this would be, usually the first thing that we do when we open the board meeting is the first agenda item is, do we have a quorum? Yes. Then we switch to approval of last month's meeting minutes. And you should have already reviewed those meeting minutes coming into the meeting. And you should be ready to vote yes or no on them, or to make a suggested change. But taking, 5 minutes to familiarize yourself with them, that's kind of wasting the time of the board. That's an expectation that you should be coming into the meeting ready to go on that. And also be on time. I know I'm sometimes a few minutes late coming into my board meeting, but sometimes we have people that are like 25 minutes late and we don't have a quorum without them. So we're all kind of sitting there. We can't start without them, and it can be a little bit frustrating. Okay, another responsibility for you as a board member is at least once a year, take a quick spin through your association's documents. And by that, I mean your CC&Rs, your bylaws, your articles of incorporation, your rules, your architectural guidelines. Just span through them quickly and get the general lay of the law on them, okay? So that if a question comes up regarding assessments and how much you can charge or how much you can increase the assessment rate, okay, I'm going to the CC&Rs for that. If a question comes up, what month is your annual meeting? Okay, that's going to be in our bylaws. Or if a question comes up, can we have glass in the pool? That's probably going to be in your rules. And so just having a general working knowledge of what's in the documents. And like I said, 15 minutes max. Do a quick spin once a year and look at those documents. That's something that, in my opinion, is a responsibility of your board, so that you're aware of, what you're enforcing and what your responsibilities are in terms of the association's governing documents. The next one we're going to talk about is probably the most important thing I'm going to say here today, and that is adhering to your fiduciary duty. What does that mean? it's basically every decision that you make as a board member, you should be acting in the best interests of the association. So put your interests aside and put the interests of the association in first position when you're making board decisions. That is your responsibility of serving on the board. You're, managing the affairs of the association. You have a duty of care, which means that you have to, properly research things before you make a decision on it. You need to evaluate options. You need to, get bids if it's a larger project to make sure that you're paying market value. You should be using licensed and bonded contractors. So the first prong of like the fiduciary duty is the duty of care. Then we have a duty of confidentiality, which is the second prong of the fiduciary duty. And that means that anything that you hear in executive session, you cannot talk about that with anybody but the other board members, the manager, and that's it. You can't go home and talk about it with your spouse or your mahjong group or your walking group or your, pickleball group, whatever. It is something that you find out in executive session. Everything is confidential and you should not be discussing that with anybody. And then the third prong is a duty to avoid conflicts of interest. So you should never be personally profiting by serving on the board. You shouldn't be getting special favors by vendors. You shouldn't be getting kickbacks. You shouldn't be hiring your relatives and friends, giving them, jobs to work in your community. And so really the fiduciary duty it's an important part of your role as a board member. So just quick summary on that again. Fiduciary duty means you need to act in the best interest of the association. There's three duties, part of the three prongs of the fiduciary duty. You have the duty of care, duty of confidentiality, and then the last one is the duty to avoid conflicts of interest or self-dealing. So can't profit from serving on the board. If there's one thing you're going to remember from today, please, fiduciary duty, that is a very, very important concept when you're serving on a volunteer nonprofit board. Okay, the next thing that we want to talk about is your responsibility when you're serving on the board is that you're expected to oversee the association's services and facilities as a business. So you're expected to balance your budget. We're going to talk about the budget in a minute. You do a budget every year for the association and the board votes on it and you check on it every month to see, if you have enough income coming in to meet your expenses. And if you're over budget, how are we going to, make that difference up? Using licensed and bonded contractors. I'm going to probably say that 2 or 3 times today, and I'm sure it's going to get annoying, but it needs to be said. If you hire an unlicensed and unbonded contractor and they come in and they get hurt or they don't do a good job, you're not acting in the best interests of the association, right? Because now it's costing more, penny wise, pound foolish. So just really treating it as a business, and being professional in your transactions, your dealings with vendors, treating your management company with respect, working with your vendors in a positive, amicable way. When there are problems, sitting down and talking about it with your vendor, versus, immature behavior, that type of thing. So really overseeing and treating every aspect of the association as a business, and making sure that, the financial side is being managed well, making sure that the maintenance side is being, handled appropriately, making sure that the vendor relationships are good, and also making sure that you're listening to the homeowners and being courteous when they come and are upset about something at a meeting. And doing your best to communicate with them about, things that are going on in the association and responding to questions that they may have or problems that they may bring to the board's attention. Okay, the next responsibility I'm going to talk about is the management company. So many of you have a management company in place, and one of your responsibilities is overseeing the management company. And, basically one thing that I like to talk about is, I think we talked about this maybe last month or the month before in one of the classes that I taught virtually. The management company is a team with you, okay? And there's the balance of the power tips always with the association's board because you have the right to hire or fire the management company, right? But it shouldn't be, when you're on a team, I think anybody who's ever played sports or who's been on a work team, knows that when you're on a team, you always want to be fair and nice and work together with all of the team members. And it's the same situation with your management company. And really, this applies to any other vendor too, your landscaper, your pool company, your lawyer. And basically, what that means is yes, you are the boss. You're the one who decides who hires the management company. You are the one who decides the attorney. It's kind of interesting. A lot of times the management company tries to push their attorney on you. Be wary of that. You make an independent decision about who your attorney is. And so to get back to, the relationship with your vendors, specifically your management company, try to get along. Recognize that you are the boss, but they're a team member that helps you be more effective in your job. So I always say you get more bees with honey. Be nice. When there's problems, try to work it out with the vendor. Get legal involved if there's a problem that can't be solved. But one of your roles is going to be to oversee the management company, and you're doing that every month at your board meeting. And at your annual meeting, your homeowners are giving you feedback how the management company is doing, I'm sure, or maybe throughout the year. And you probably can just look at the property and be like, okay, is the management company, on top of the landscaper and doing their job, etc. So one of your responsibilities is obviously overseeing the management company, but and they oversee banking, budgets, insurance, utilities, landscaping, maintenance, taxes, all kinds of different roles for you. So you have to kind of stay on top of them to make sure that they're doing everything that their contract says they're doing, but also balance that with they're my team member. We want to be respectful and kind and nice. And when there's problems, we want to talk about them and try to see if we can find common ground. Okay, the next thing we're going to talk about are a couple of laws that I think are important that you're aware of, and probably the most important law in Arizona that you need to be aware of, in my opinion, is the open meeting law. And so under Arizona law, all boards, anytime the board of directors of a condo or a planned community meets and there's a quorum present and you're discussing association business, it needs to be an open board meeting. And so what does that mean? That means you have to give notice of the meeting and provide an agenda 48 hours in advance of the meeting. And you can go into executive session, which is just the board. And typically boards do that after the open meeting, and you can talk about certain subjects. Most common ones that you talk about are going to be like advice from your attorney, any pending or contemplated litigation, and maybe any personnel or independent contractor problems that may have arisen. And maybe occasionally personal information about an owner in your community, or maybe a vendor or an employee of the association. But just be aware that there is a special law that pertains to open meetings. And anytime we have a quorum of the board discussing association business, it needs to be an open meeting. And you got to give that 48 hours notice and post the agenda 48 hours as well to comply with the law. Also, if you're going into executive session, you also have to post a notice for the executive session. And we think it's best practices to also post the agenda. You're not going to put in detail on the closed session or the executive session, but you are going to indicate which section under the law, which is for planned communities 33-1804, for condos 33-1248, which section of the law under executive sessions you're going to be discussing in the executive session. Another aspect of an important responsibility or role of a board member, just kind of switching gears here, is, enforcing your documents. So you have a responsibility as a board to collect unpaid assessments. You have a responsibility to act on violations. You have a responsibility to pay insurance for the common areas or whatever other insurance is required for your community. So you have all these different responsibilities that are outlined in your documents. And your responsibility is to be aware of them, and then also to take the action that you're required to do under your documents, whether it's pay bills, collect assessments, enforce the documents. If we have an owner that, has we painted their house Phoenix Suns colors and they didn't get approval and everybody's up in arms on it, you're going to be the one as the board members that are going to have to enforce that. Another thing to think about is fines. So if you have an enforcement issue and you have an owner that is not complying with the documents, and we talk about this frequently in our classes, there's a number of different remedies you have. You can fine the owner for the violation. It has to be a violation of the CC&Rs, bylaws, or rules, and you have to give notice and an opportunity to be heard before you levy that fine. But we do have a fine right for owners that are violating the documents. We can file a lawsuit against them. We can go to the ADRE, Arizona Department of Real Estate, and for $500, one claim can be heard regarding a dispute between an owner and an association regarding, a violation of the CC&Rs. You can hire a lawyer. The association can have their lawyer send a letter to the owner regarding a violation. So if you have enforcement issues, you have a lot of different remedies as an association, and just be familiar with what those remedies are. So just real quickly again, we can fine them. We can file a lawsuit against them. We can go to the ADRE, Arizona Department of Real Estate, and have their administrative law judge arm of the ADRE hear complaints between owners and associations on certain topics. And you can have an attorney write them a letter. So there are a number of different things that you can do to meet your responsibility to enforce the association's documents. Okay, let's talk about records reviews. So occasionally, as a board member or as a board, you're going to get a email or letter from an owner, and they're going to be requesting books and records of the association. And just be aware that under Arizona law, association boards and associations in general have to comply with those records requests within 10 business days of receiving the written request. There are some documents that you can withhold from discovery, but they're very few and far between. So if they want like legal opinions that the association's attorney gave to the board, that's not going to be discoverable because the statute says it's not, and also because it's attorney-client privileged. Some other areas that they can't see is they can't see how much vendors are making. They can't see anything that's in current litigation. So they can't request the file on an owner that we may have a pending lawsuit with. But just be aware that, okay, owners can request records. We have 10 business days to get them to the owner when they request them. We can charge 15 cents per page if they request copies of the documents. And there are certain things that can be withheld, but it's very few and far between. Okay, let's talk a little bit about communication. So one of your responsibilities as a board member is that you are required to communicate, with your owners on different topics. And what we find is that the boards that communicate the best, guess what? They have the fewest problems. So, there are some requirements for communication, like, let me give you an example. You have to put up your notice of meetings, right? And post your agendas before your regular and executive session board meetings. That's a communication requirement. But there's not a requirement to do like a newsletter or to have a Facebook page or to, send out emails about different things going on in your community. But it's a good idea to do it because the associations that are communicating and the owners are aware of what's going on, they're going to be in such a better place because there's always going to be gadflies, people that are disruptive and don't like the association. And when the gadfly goes and talks to people and starts saying, oh, I hate the association, the board doesn't know what they're doing, it's going to kind of fall on deaf ears because if the board has been communicating regularly and the common areas look nice and there aren't a bunch of problems, guess what? They're not going to listen to the gadfly. The owners aren't because they feel up to date on things. And another good way to communicate is to post the meeting minutes on your website, the regular session meeting minutes, not the executive, because the owners can go and read them even if they can't attend the meeting. Also, same thing, if you're on Zoom for your meetings, put the video on there so that people can go in and listen to what happened at the meeting if they can't be there in person. So again, just good communication is the secret sauce for a lot less hassles for you on your time serving on the board. Okay, let's talk a little bit about what are some financial requirements that you're going to have for serving on your board. A couple things just to mention first. The treasurer obviously is going to have a heightened responsibility on what they need to do for the community in terms of watching the financials. I served as the treasurer for my association for probably 3 or 4 years back, like in 2017, 18, 19. When I was a treasurer, I spent a lot more time looking at the board packet. Instead of 5 to 15 minutes, I was spending more like 30 to 45 to an hour looking through very specifically all the financial information. So, as shifting gears to, okay, what's my responsibility as for finances as a board member? First point I'm going to make is that the treasurer is going to have a heightened responsibility, right? You need to be looking at all the bank statements. You need to be looking at all the checks. You need to be looking at the delinquencies if people aren't paying, and making sure that we're putting those into collections with the management company or your attorney. Looking at the general financial statement with the assets and liabilities, and just making sure that also the year-to-date budget, making sure that we're not over budget on things. These are all different types of responsibilities that, we have as board members. And the treasurer, like I said, has a heightened responsibility. Now, if you're not the treasurer and you're on the board, you still got to look at things because you never know, is the treasurer looking at it as carefully as they should be? So fortunately for my association, thank goodness, we have our treasurer is a CPA right now. So I kind of feel like a little bit more at ease. But, before that person was a CPA and I was no longer the treasurer, I would spend a little bit more time, depending on how much financial knowledge the treasurer has. Every month I still spend time looking at everything that's in the board packet carefully. Like, are there any weird checks in there? Are there any, you know, bounced checks or return checks? Those are all like kind of warning signs that there could be something going on that would be inappropriate. We have a great cheat sheet on how to, prevent fraud and embezzlement. And one of the things it says is just be vigilant, right? Look at that board packet. Do the bank balances line up with where they should be, right? Are you seeing proof that we actually have CDs? Are there a bunch of overdraft charges? There shouldn't be. Are all of the bills being paid to our vendors? I mean, I've seen some crazy stuff in 30 years. So, occasionally I'll see something where one association pays another association's bill by mistake. The treasurer really should be catching that, but it's possible too that a secondary board member might catch that. So being vigilant is what I'm going to say as a board member at large, looking at the financials every month at the board meeting. Okay, don't let the management company get way behind on the financials. That's a very bad idea. You should be seeing the financials even if you're not having a board meeting every month. Okay, so what are some other aspects of managing the financials for your association? You're going to have to prepare an annual budget. Typically, you do that in August or September every year for the next year. Typically, the management company gives you the first draft of it, but you kind of play around with it at a meeting and look at the numbers. And so one of your responsibilities is going to be you have to prepare the budget for next year. It's typically done in the late summer. And then, as I said previously, throughout the year, you look at the year-to-date budget in your board packet and see, are we overspending? Are we underspending? Do we have enough money? Are we going to project to have enough money? So the budget is an important aspect of running the finances of the association. Another important aspect is having a reserve study and having a reserve account or reserve fund for your association. Why is that important? Because we need to do long-term planning financially for your your capital assets for your association, your capital expenses. And so it's kind of like a savings account for all of your CapEx type things, capital expenditures. So, the best way to know how much you should have in your reserve account is to have a credentialed, licensed reserve company come out to your property and prepare a reserve study. And that the reserve studies should be updated, anywhere between 2 and 5 years. Every 2 and 5 years, association should be updating that reserve study because inflation and, different things occur that may change the pricing and it could, require you to put more money away. Okay, so you should have a reserve account, right? That's something, that point I just made. You should have a reserve study. You should follow the reserve study to the best of your ability. Okay, so every association is in a different financial position, but be savvy, be financially savvy. You should be putting money away every month as best you can based upon what the reserve study is suggesting that you put away so that you have adequate reserves for your association. Okay, another financial part that you need to think about is that you have to have an audit review or compilation every year under Arizona law. You only have to have that audit done by a CPA if it's required in your documents to have the audit done by a CPA. But that's just something you should have in your mind. Like, okay, financially, we need to have that audit review or compilation done every year. And if it doesn't have to be done by a CPA, I would prefer, best practices would be to have it done by a CPA or a bookkeeper or somebody with financial experience who's independent and not with the management company and not on the board, so that you have a totally independent person. Another financial requirement is that you have to file taxes. You have to file state and federal taxes for your association. I'm going to lump this in as financial, but it's kind of right on the cusp of being financial, a little bit of a gray area. You also have to file an annual report every year with the Arizona Corporation Commission. And that lists who your directors are and other information about addresses for the directors so that you maintain your nonprofit status as a board and as an association. So these are really, kind of like the financial, requirements. I'm going to mention one thing about annual meetings because it's kind of a good tie-in here. So the annual meetings are also, you're required to have an annual meeting every year as a board, and that's your time to shine. That's your time to tell all the homeowners, this is what we've accomplished this year, and these are the problems we had, and this is our plan going forward with our budget. It's also a good time to show them the financial statement so they understand, where we are as a community in terms of how much money we have in the reserve, what our expenses are going to be projected for this year and why we may need to do an increase in the assessments, that type of thing. So that's kind of related also to the financials, but also related to the communication, because we want to go in there and just kill it at the annual meeting. We want to have a successful annual meeting so that owners feel comfortable with how things are running in the association, that the board has got things managed and handled, and that the management company is professional in how they approach the annual meeting and conduct it. Okay, let's talk a little bit about hiring professionals. This is important. As a board responsibility, remember that you're going to be hiring different professionals to help you run your association, and the little Rolodex of people that you're going to need are going to be your management company, your attorney, your insurance representative, your landscaping representative, pool company representative, reserve specialist, if I didn't say that yet. And these are going to be like your trusted advisors. This is going to be like your cabinet for your association, your kitchen cabinet. And so you want to make sure that you're hiring the best people to help you achieve your goals. And so just be careful, when you're picking your trusted advisors, make sure that you're the one picking them and not the management companies per se. Obviously, they can give you recommendations or suggestions, but you want to be independent and you want to try to find the best professionals to help your association be successful. And sometimes, I'm just going to mention this, the management company has like a special relationship, maybe with the landscaper, pool company, lawyer, whatever. You got to be a little wary of that because you want to make sure that you're getting the best price and the best independent advice. And so you want to kind of have your antenna up about that and make sure that when you're looking to your kitchen cabinet, that they are actually thinking about what's the best interest for your association and the board as a whole. Okay, let's see. A couple more things I want to talk about. Probably the last one I think is probably the most important thing. Well, two. Okay, so we talked a little bit about the treasurer's role and how important that is as a board member. The other really important role is the president. The buck stops with the president. So it's really important that you have the right person be the president. And what I would recommend is that you take a peek at the cheat sheet that we put out there earlier in the presentation, right when we started talking about board member roles and responsibilities.
Honestly, the president has the hardest job in the community. The treasurer has a lot of oversight on the financials, but the president kind of oversees everything. It's kind of like the umbrella that oversees everything at the association. Try your best to support your president. And hopefully, the president is the type of person that's going to bring people together. It's going to be reasonable, nice to everybody, responsive, care about your community, and probably puts in more hours than anybody, including the treasurer. And really, the buck stops at them. If there's a problem, everybody looks to the president and says, why aren't you getting this done? And I can tell you, I've been president of my association. It was the longest year of my life. It was a lot to manage. And so for all the presidents out there and all the treasurers out there, my heart goes out to you. It's not an easy job. It's best, I think, if you, if you aren't working full time and you don't have kids, little kids, which is kind of what I had, because you can actually devote more time to it. Because honestly, being the president of an association is like a part-time or possibly even a full-time job. So, take a look at our cheat sheet on your different roles. You're kind of the liaison with everybody. You're the most important liaison, probably with all the vendors. You have the responsibility to, most angry homeowners will come to you first. You have to make sure the board's getting along. You've got to keep the relationships with the vendors happy. It's just a very hard job. So just recognize if there's any presidents that are out there listening today, my heart goes out to you. I know it's a difficult job. Our firm is here to help you if you have any problems or questions. We are definitely here to support and help you so that you can make good decisions and that you can have a stress-free time serving as president of your association. And you just remember this too, some years are harder than others. Some years are just by nature harder than others because there's maybe a difficult owner or you're doing a big project or you're getting sued or something. I mean, there's just all kinds of different things that can come up. So some years are harder than others. If you have one hard year, the next year might be easy peasy. Okay, last but not least, for the board members, very important thing I want to finish with is we've talked a lot about performing, your duties as a board member in a business-like manner, but just being approachable, business-like, nice, kind, empathetic as a board is important. Yes, this is a business. But yes, these people that you are, meeting at board meetings, they're also your neighbors. And, you want to have all of those qualities to be a good board. And so, yes, it is a business. Yes, we are going to be professional and treat people in a business-like manner, but also have empathy. If you hear, that somebody comes to the board and maybe they've just found out they have cancer and they're behind on their assessments, try to work with them. Or maybe if you hear about a difficult situation in your community where maybe you have an elderly person with dementia and they can't maintain their lot anymore, maybe we can get some volunteers to go in and help clean up the lot or, but just thinking of ways to make this more of a community, right? Having, a Halloween party, a 4th of July party for the association, donuts and coffee some Saturdays, just try your best to make it fun and try your best to get along and try your best to be responsive to owners and be nice to your vendors in a business-like and professional way. And I think if you can do that, your experience on the board is going to be a lot better situation than, if it's vinegar. I always say get more things with honey than you do with vinegar. So keep that in mind as you're, running your association. Okay, just briefly, where do you begin if you're a new board member? Some suggestions that we've talked about today would be take a quick spin through your documents, right? Make sure you're coming to the board meetings prepared. Try to find a mentor on the board if you don't understand something. Because sometimes, I know, when I first got on my board, I had a lot of questions about our sewer system that was acting up. And I was able to reach out to our president and be like, hey, can you explain that to me a little better? I'm really worried that this could be a much larger expense than what you're anticipating. And once she explained to me the history on it, I understood it a lot better and I was a lot less concerned. So spin through the documents, prepare for the meetings, reach out to trusted board members, mentors that can help you better understand things. become familiar with the laws that pertain to associations, which is exactly what you're doing if you're here today. So attend the free classes. There's at least 2 free classes that I'm teaching virtually every single month of the year. And if you can't attend live, think about it watching the videos on our website or looking at our cheat sheets to get better awareness and knowledge of what your responsibilities are serving on the board. Also, you can look at our cheat sheets. They give you direct links to our, any legislation that questions on, like the open meeting law or books and records law, or, really any law that is in Arizona. You're going to be able to find a cheat sheet in our on our website that will cover those different topics. So make sure you properly utilize the free resources that are available to you. One thing I also want to mention that sometimes people who are new to the board don't know, but I do want you to be aware. Okay, so what are the things like the hard knowledge that you have to have? So you have to be aware of what your documents state, right? And then you have to be aware that there's state laws that regulate associations, and our cheat sheets, cover those very well in our classes. And then the final thing that you really need to be aware of is there are federal laws too that apply to associations. Like we can't discriminate against certain protected classes under the Fair Housing Act. Or there's the OTARD rule through the FCC about satellite dishes and antennas. And so we have a cheat sheet on federal laws too. So just so that you're aware, it's not just the state laws, it's also the federal laws and your documents that you need to have a general working knowledge of. And remember, you're not going to be able to know everything because truly sometimes I even have to go back and look up what's something in the Condo Act. If I'm, have a question on something, I have to go scan through it and just reread it again to make sure I have the exact information correct. But knowing where to look. So our website's a great resource for you. These classes are a great resource for you. And just pick up the phone and call our firm. We are here to help. Or email us and we'll do what we can to help you answer any questions that you have. Okay, let's talk a little bit about, we've covered the roles and responsibilities of directors, which is great. We actually kind of covered a lot today. It's already 11:52. Let's talk a little bit about the code of conduct. We have a cheat sheet on code of conduct for board members. I only whip this out when the board is highly dysfunctional. And if you're in that situation, my heart definitely goes out to you. So a code of conduct is like a written document that describes what the expectations are of board members during and in some cases after their service as a board member. Basically what it is if there's a problem, like let's give an example. Let's say that you have a board member who doesn't get along with the rest of the board. And that's not always a problem because I know like when I first got back on my board, I didn't have the same views as many of my board members, but we all got along and were amicable, even though we may not have agreed on how to do certain things. We had differing opinions. We all were respectful of each other. But let's say you've got a problem where you've got a board that's divided, which is always challenging, and they're just not getting along. And I mean, I have a couple examples of this right now that I am, managing with some of our clients, and the board's just fighting, right? Maybe half the board wants to remove the other half of the board, whatever, or maybe we've got a board member that's leaking information and breaching their fiduciary duty of confidentiality. I mean, there's all different types of problems that honestly keep our firm in business that we see very frequently with boards. We'll whip out this cheat sheet. We'll whip out this cheat sheet on the code of conduct, and we'll say, okay, it's our recommendation based upon what we're hearing with the problems in your association. We think that you should consider adopting this code of conduct for your board. And you just need a majority of the board to vote to adopt it. And we give you, the sample language in our cheat sheet, and we're going to be sharing it with you if we haven't already, or you can find it on our website. It's called Board of Directors Code of Conduct. And once a majority of the board approves it, if somebody violates the code of conduct, and it's kind of simple. I mean, it's basically, hey, you have fiduciary duty to the association. You got to keep things confidential that you hear in an executive session. We want to have orderly meetings, so there can't be any yelling, shouting, profanity. You need to comply with the documents as a board member. So you can't, not pay your dues or your assessments, and you got to maintain your yard. And then how do we resolve conflicts that come up with our board? All of this is included in the code of conduct. So it's kind of a good little tip to keep in mind if you're having a lot of problems as a board. The sample language is right on the cheat sheet. You're welcome to use it. Another suggestion if you're having problems on a board is to have a boot camp. And this boot camp, what happens is our firm comes in and talks to the board. And we can do it by Zoom, we can do it in person, and we listen to what the issues are that are facing your association. What are the problems? And we listen to everybody on the board, and we talk a little bit about, different personality types and how that may impact decision making and, behavior on boards. And we really just talk through the issues. And we come out of the boot camp with a refreshed feeling that now we can manage things better in our association. We air grievances, we talk through solutions, and we come up with a plan for moving forward. So keep that in your back pocket. The code of conduct is a good little tool if you've got problems with people, violating your documents or not living up to their fiduciary responsibilities. Another good little tool is to have our firm come in and do a boot camp. And usually it's only about an hour to an hour and a half. It's a great tool to help you get things back on track if you're really having some dysfunction on your board right now. I want to give you a quick little summary of the poll today, just because we kind of tagged that and put that at the end. We had 194 people at peak, which is amazing. So thanks everybody for being here today. 135 participated in the poll, and we had representation from every city that we teach these classes for. So Avondale 2%, Chandler 10%, Glendale 5%, Goodyear 8%, Mesa killing it today at 23%, Peoria 3%, Phoenix 14%, Scottsdale 16%, Surprise 9%, and Tempe at 9%. So great turnout from all the different cities that we are teaching classes with in conjunction with the Neighborhood Services HOA Academy. We had 64% board members here today, 8% managers, and 24% interested homeowners, 4% other. So very heavy with the board members today. We have a couple other opportunities coming up in June and one more in May that we want to make you aware of. Tomorrow, on May 21st, we're going to be teaching a class live in person in Surprise, Arizona. It's the Surprise HOA Summit at the Surprise City Hall from 6 to 8 p.m. You can register for that by going to our website. We might even be giving you a link now on Zoom or Facebook Live, but you can go on our seminars tab on mulcahylawfirm.com. And we're going to talk about the 10 things that can get HOA and condo boards into trouble. And then also secrets of successful associations. So that's going to be a great class. Hope that you will be able to attend if you can. Also want to mention our June schedule. So on Friday, June 6th, we're going to be teaching our First Fridays live on Zoom and Facebook Live between 9 and 10 a.m. And then we're going to be teaching our Neighborhood Services class on Tuesday, June 17th from 11 to about 12:30. And the topic for that class is going to be amendments, mastering the amendment process and how to work effectively with rental properties. So those are going to be 3 great classes that are coming up, before mid-June. I hope everybody had a wonderful Mother's Day in May, and I look forward to seeing all of you at our classes in June. I cannot believe it that our year is almost halfway over. Crazy. But I certainly enjoy the opportunity to work with all of you, and I appreciate the wonderful participation today. I'd like to give a shout out to Alexis in my office because she was very helpful today on the classes. So thank you so much, Alexis, for being there for me and helping me get these classes done today and making sure that everything was running smoothly. So have a great rest of the week, everybody, and a nice Memorial Day weekend. And I look forward to seeing you at classes coming up in this week and in June. Take care, everybody. Have a great holiday weekend.